We talk about if the Ravens need to trade for a star and more with a very special guest next here on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And we return here with another episode of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire. We're here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On Ravens your first listen today. We're free and available on all platforms. And we're back. It is Purple Friday, and that means our Purple Friday guest is here once again to talk Ravens football, and that is former Baltimore Ravens wide receiver, Super Bowl champion Qadry Ismail. And Q, since we last spoke, the Ravens haven't necessarily done a ton in free agency. We'll talk about the move they did make here in this first segment. How you doing today?
I'm doing wonderful. Again, another opportunity to talk about a whole lot of nothing. Why? Because when it comes to the offseason, there's only one paper champion. That's the Cleveland Browns, or at least they're trying to defend their title with some of these moves. But otherwise, yeah, let's talk some football.
Yeah, let's do it. And you're right. At the end of last week's show, you said at least the Browns will not be the paper champs. And then the next day, they trade for Deshaun Watson. So
they heard me.
On the field, that quarterback move there, if he even plays with a potential suspension looming, we'll see how that ends up going. But Q, the Ravens, their move that they made over this past week was the re-signing of Patrick Ricard to a 3-year deal. The reported deal, it's around just under $4 million. So second highest paid fullback money, which in terms of highest paid at any position is not a ton. And there's been almost like a split in the fan base about whether this was a good move or not for the Ravens. Now, in my opinion, I think it's a fine move for them. The Ravens, they use a fullback. They use a fullback a lot, and Ricard is very good at what he does. So Q, based off the deal, the years, the money, and the fit, were you happy with this re-signing for the Ravens?
I mean, I think personally I was happy for it. I know, looking at the way the offense is run, he is the perfect fit for the offense, and they utilize the fullback position. Heck, Kyle Juszczyk, Vontae Leach, they all play pivotal roles on this football team. But when you look at, I think, the pushback and some of the fans that are a little bit, shall I say, anti-Greg Roman, they, I believe, look at a Pat Ricard and they lump it all together as far as some of the deficiencies that they had as an offense last year and that lack of production. It came from the fact that, this is a run-first offense, and Lamar Jackson being hurt. You had some other guys in there. They did well, but they didn't get wins. They were in close games, but they weren't able to finish games. And so, Greg Roman is going to get a lot of the blame. And I think that close kind of Pat Ricard reminds everybody of a Greg Roman run-first dominant style offense. Not a big splash kind of a guy, not going to be like a big-name receiver. Somebody like a Tyreek Hill. Obviously, the quarterback situation is taken care of, but, an Amari Cooper going to the Cleveland Browns, things along those lines. I think people kind of, look around the league and they're like, wow, all these splash players, heck, even Von Miller going over to the Bills. Everybody wants that guy. And I think to get that guy, you got to have money, but you also got to have a plan on how to best utilize that guy. And I think for the Ravens, they had a plan in place as far as money was concerned. He met that need. He meets the need as far as in the locker room, on the field. It's a win for both guys. And I just think that, ultimately you need to show a little grace when it comes to, allowing this football team to formulate and to have a good roster. We just, there's some unknowns yet to still be looked at. And part of those unknowns is this is the offseason. We don't know who they're going to draft. We don't know what other teams are going to draft. How is everything going to mesh? It'll all unfold itself. But I think this is a fan base that's, frustrated and a little bit impatient, and rightly so.
Yeah, and I think part of some of the issues with Ricard returning for some fans is the fact that they think that he will take snaps away from players like Devin Duvernay, James Prochet. The Ravens line up in the slot a little bit, but Ricard is someone who they motion in from the slot and motion him into the backfield from there. They'd like to, use him in a bunch of different roles. He's not just a fullback. And look, he posted that on Instagram. He made it known that he is not just a fullback. But Q, in your ideal world for this offense, how would you utilize a player like Ricard? I mean, is it someone who you would still line up all over the place, using motion a lot? He's, you don't want him to be out there in the slot running routes out of the slot, but I think lining him up there a little bit, moving him into the backfield from there, I think that's the role the Ravens have liked to use him in. But is there any way in your eyes they could use him any better?
So everyone has their role. And if you remember Tom Brady, he didn't have these, dynamic, phenomenal receivers or even running backs. He had guys that knew their role and did their roles extremely well. And I believe he won, 6 Super Bowl championships up in New England. The one year where he had a stud in Randy Moss, and obviously Wes Welker was in his prime too, they finished 18-1. I know this to be true. It's what you do with the players that you have, them knowing their roles. And I think for Pat Ricard, he kind of fits that mold of just not going to wow you, but he can get critical first downs when the defense is trying to take away Mark Andrews on the other side of the football field. When defenses are overloaded to one side and they're selling out playing a run, you need a critical first down, and you can get him out in the flat on a naked boot. Well, then let's do the naked boot action, draw the defense over onto one side. All eyes are on Lamar Jackson, and now you can get Patrick Ricard, out in space and allow him to pick up some critical yards, much needed yards. Are you, game planning an entire game plan around him? We're not saying that, but we're also saying that this is the National Football League and teams adjust. If you don't have a counterbalance to your offense, then what good are you? Have a counterbalance to your offense. And Lamar Jackson is the offense. Have a counterbalance to it. What is the counterbalance? Well, you don't need a big one. You just need a small one. In that particular case, is a 300-pound pancake Pat. And, yeah, you want to run the ball. You want J.K. and whomever else will be back there and healthy, Gus Edwards and company, to know that if I have a lead fullback, that guy's going to block for me. That guy's going to make and create holes for me to run through. So, quickly we forget, what dominance this offense can be, running the ball and just shoving it down everyone's throat. But I think that's part of the reason why Pat Ricard is still a Raven.
Right. And look, there are wrong ways to use Patrick Ricard. There are wrong ways to use every single player, right? If you don't put them in roles to succeed, then they're not going to be as effective on the football field. That's, an obvious statement. But I think for the Ravens, as with every team in every position, some teams just value positions more. And the Ravens offense, as it is with Greg Roman, utilizes a fullback and utilizes a fullback effectively. So if Greg Roman was fired during the offseason, the Ravens, if they went to a new offensive system, maybe there's not a position for Ricard on this team because the offense is just different at that point. But for a team that does use a fullback, I think they would want to have a good one. And Ricard is someone who just doesn't do his fullback duties well, but does other duties well also. He has the experience in the system. He's proven. So, again, this is not a move to me that moves the needle and say, oh, well, the Ravens re-signed Patrick Ricard. They're winning the Super Bowl. But it's a solid move that I think is completely okay in the grand scheme of things. But, Q, I want to ask you if you remember a 5th-round draft pick by the name of Ben Mason, because there's somebody now in Patrick Ricard who was re-signed, and there was speculation, right, as to whether Ricard would come back or not. He was asking for the tight end money, reportedly. So the Ravens signed Mason to a futures deal to come back after the whole thing with him last offseason happened. He was supposed to come back to the practice squad, then sign with the Patriots practice squad. But now with Ricard back, I don't really know if there's a role for him on this team anymore. Do you see him being a factor at all, or is that just a pick you're kind of washing down the drain at this point?
No, I don't think anything is a waste. I think if you plan for the worst and hope for the best, then that's where you'll be in the NFL. I think NFL general managers recognize you need quality depth. I think that if the guy can play well on special teams, if Mason can be a key contributor, then it's a win. So don't don't be so short-sighted. Not everybody's going to be this explosive, dynamic, big splash named player. You got to have your role players. And sure, they're not going to cost as much, but you still got to have them on your team, and you got to acquire them some form of fashion. He's here, and welcome Mason on into the club, and hopefully he can, like I said, be a key contributor.
Yeah, I think if Mason leans into being the backup fullback on this team, the Ravens, there's no guarantee that Ricard stays healthy for a full 17 games every year. And so if he can be a guy on the practice squad, let's say, who is ready and stays ready, I think that's a good role for him to have. And I think in terms of fits on teams, I think Mason, if he decides to stay with the Ravens, if he doesn't end up making the roster and he's offered a practice squad spot, I think it's a great place for him because he knows that there is a direct place for him to get snaps in the event of an injury to Ricard, which obviously you're never hoping for. But if there is the injury, then Mason can come on up and still do what Ricard does and have the experience in the system. So I think, spending a 5th round pick, I'm still not on board with that decision, but the Ravens liked him enough to do it. He's here. It happened. We just got to roll with it now. And that really is what it is. But Ricard coming back to Baltimore on a 3-year deal, and he should be a big part of the offense moving forward. We'll head into our first break here, though. When we get back, we'll be pivoting into if the Ravens should be looking to acquire a star. So be sure to stay tuned. Still a ton to talk about on Locked On Ravens. But first, let's talk a bit about BetOnline. And, of course, March Madness going on right now here as we speak. And I've said before, Illinois was in my finals. They're out. Gonzaga is actually playing right now. So depending on what happens when this episode airs, it could be either a very good ad for me here or a very bad ad for me. But from all the latest odds, if you want to bet on those games, betonline.net is the number one source for all your sports betting needs and info. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline also has hockey, sports wagering information, also including live Vegas casino games and live betting as well. So head to the website today. Use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts. We're back here, our second segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher, your host, still here with Qadry Ismail. And, of course, thank you again for making Locked On Ravens your first listen every day. And make sure you're following Locked On NFL, Locked On Experts, covering the biggest stories around the NFL every Monday through Friday in less than 30 minutes. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And Q, you made a good point in the first segment, and something I've talked about throughout the week here, about the AFC and the arms race that's going on. Because the Ravens, they have been a bit, I'd say, more aggressive than in recent seasons as we've seen them be. Marcus Williams, 5 years, $70 million. The Zadarius Smith signing/not signing was still an aggressive move for them. They signed him to a decently sized deal. Now, he did get more money with the Vikings after he ended up backing out, but that was a stretch there in about a 2-day span where they had signed Marcus Williams, Morgan Moses, Zadarius Smith. That was aggressive for them. But then you look around the rest of the league, and it's Russell Wilson going to Denver. It's Matt Ryan going to Indianapolis. Tyreek Hill going to Miami. Deshaun Watson to the Browns. And I think people are starting to get a little antsy as to they see all these other teams improving and improving in a big way with these stars. And then after now a week, the Ravens have only signed Patrick Ricard. Do you feel like, Q, this is an opportunity for them? This offseason is an opportunity for them to go out there and get a star if the price and the draft compensation and the position is right?
I mean, if you look at what they tried to do with Zadarius, you can see, hey, we are trying to be that team that is serious about getting back into the conversation. What's the offensive line? The young man Moses, I mean, you filled a strong need. The dude, is consistent. He plays. He's healthy, and he's good, and he doesn't give up sacks. What are we talking about here? Like Marcus Williams, Eric Weddle, and gosh golly, you got Jim Leonard, and then you, of course, got Mount Rushmore himself and Ed Reed. So outside of those safeties, who else have you really? Well, my guy, of course, Rod Woodson, but that was some time ago. The point I'm making is simple. When you look at the way the Ravens are doing it, they are being aggressive. They've got some good players. They're football players, not splash name only players. And I think that's the difference. You and I, we talk football. We live, eat, breathe it. And so those guys, we're anxious to see how they're going to gel and fit in. We talked about Patrick Ricard and how important he is to what Greg Roman likes to do. Mason, if you think about it, you got to have sometimes your big package, and they had that big package when it was amazing bully ball. But now from a standpoint of who's healthy, who's not healthy, Mason gets an opportunity when they do go a form of bully ball and try to run the ball with big guys in there and multiple guys that can do a lot of motioning and getting up the field. So, this notion that if you don't sign some star guy and, have XYZ of, you're falling for the same trap that we've seen time and time again that the Cleveland Browns as an organization has done. They will give you the chills if you're their fan base in the offseason. And they're like, wow, well, of course they did it this year with Deshaun Watson. But again, I think that there's probably going to be personal conduct levied against him as far as the league and his suspension. At the same time, you got to get up to speed with him and Amari. It's not going to be hard, but it sure the heck ain't going to be like just a walk in the park. Mitch Trubisky, sure, hit or miss. Who knows where he's at? I think he probably has settled down more now that pressure was off of him and kind of, surveyed the land with Josh Allen and how all that was for him. So he's going to be better for Pittsburgh. Obviously, Joe Burrow and company, mother of pearl. They got La'el Collins, a couple of other guys, and they still got some really strong skill positions. So, this division, they've made their moves. They're jockeying for position. I still think there are a lot of moves left to be made. I still also think the Ravens are sitting in a good position. Let's see where the draft comes, and hopefully they can get some guys that'll excite the Raven fan club that's more along the lines of on the periphery compared to you and I, where, we're really like looking at every little detail and trying to be, on point with it.
Right. And I think also people, when they think about the word trade and the word Ravens together, they don't really view it as, the Ravens never trade for stars, because they've done it before. But I think people have been, underwhelmed by the trades they've made because it hasn't involved first-round picks or guys that make $30 million a season. But they've gone out there and gotten Yannick Ngakoue and Calais Campbell and Marcus Peters, etc. And while, look, Ngakoue didn't work out, we can all admit that. Calais Campbell has been great for the Ravens. Marcus Peters has been great for the team. But Q, with the Lamar Jackson extension kind of not up in the air, but if it does happen, for me, I think it does get done, but of course nothing's set in stone right now. If and when that does happen, would you be wary adding another big contract to a team that already has Ronnie Stanley on an $100 million deal, Marlon Humphrey on an $100 million deal, and for Stanley's case, he hasn't played in a year and a half, and we don't know what his status is like. So in terms of a star trade, if the Ravens were to go that route, would you be concerned with adding a player who would be making $20 or $30 million a season?
Well, apparently the new television deal, which is what sets the salary cap to begin with, is expected to go up. You see it in the broadcast side of things. They're like, look, Amazon is about to make a big push. You got what? ESPN, trying to retool its Monday night package. Everything is to, garner the favor of advertisers saying, hey, look, we get the NFL on our station and people tune in to us and blah, blah, blah. And the NFL is like, yeah. Where's our billions? All I know is the salary cap is going to go up. And if the salary cap goes up, then that just means more money that the players are going to have an opportunity to get a crack at. We obviously saw what Deshaun Watson has done as far as his guarantees, and that's a precedent that is like, wow, he's really, he's setting the bar again. All these different contracts keep setting the bar. So I think there's going to be some guys that are going to be creative, and they're going to be like, all right, look, you know what? I'll take maybe they'll take quote unquote less, if you will, if it's fully guaranteed, because technically Your signing bonus is the only thing that really is guaranteed. So, you know what? I think overall, big picture, this is the NFL. They right now are printing money. It took a dip with COVID, but $208 million, and they're right back in the conversation again as far as the salary cap is concerned. I don't see that changing.
Right, and even when the Ravens traded for Calais Campbell, there was a huge kind of among the fan base, there was a question of, well, how are the Ravens going to afford him? Because he was on a pretty big contract at the time. He was on a 1-year deal. I think still 1 year left on his deal with Jacksonville. Trade for him, give him a 1-year extension to kind of make the money work and move it around a little bit. So you can make it work. The issue is if you're signing a guy to such a lucrative deal that you just, in 3 years, there's a point of no return, which we have now seen with Green Bay and with Kansas City, where they have signed guys to huge deals and they just can't keep everyone. And that's what we're starting to see with the Ravens here, where they have drafted so well in recent seasons where they can't keep Zadarius Smith and Matthew Judon and all these different players that they grow, because by the time they actually get to their first extension, they're earning $10, $15, $20 million a season. So that's a testament to how the Ravens draft, but also it's just a matter of the game and how you kind of play with the salary cap, make it work and maneuver it around. So I think that they still could acquire somebody with a big contract and make it work. But Q, if the Ravens were to trade for a star, where would you invest that money in that draft capital in positionally? Because obviously with the Tyreek Hill trade, it has sparked some debate as to should the Ravens go out there and now invest in a wide receiver like a Hill, Adams, Hopkins, who's making $20 million a year at the receiver position? Or do you feel like there would be a position better for them to do that with if there was a star available, like a cornerback or an edge or one of those defensive positions?
Yeah, obviously the edge rusher is the guy that sticks out. I think at the same time, if there's some stud offensive lineman that's disgruntled or whatever, I would look there. I think you have the stars in the skill position category. What are we doing? Maybe linebacker. If I am correct, Bobby Wagner is still available. If that is the case, as of this, we are saying to ourselves, who's a big name? He's a big name that's out there. Like, this is easy. And what I mean by easy, I'm saying, you want difference makers at each level. And you have difference makers on the offensive side of the ball. And if you can get some more, cool. But in the case of either, strategically wooing him over to, a guy of his caliber, perhaps that might come available, whatever, I guess that's where I would kind of hang my hat. Either that linebacker / okay, what are we doing along the defensive line, rush in. You got Michael Pierce. He's signed. He's official. So that's a good thing. But I think overall, yeah, you gotta figure out who do you really, really want to see as not necessarily a fan popularity contest choice. That's how I would describe it. And the Ravens don't do that anyway. But I think, we can kind of get carried away and think, ooh, wow. I mean, don't get me wrong. I did tweet out there like, Cheetah, you look pretty doggone fast in purple. And I think he would have, worn this jersey well. I think he would have fit in extremely well. But, at what cost? The Miami Dolphins had what they felt they had, and they needed to load up. Well, Hollywood Brown, you're safe for now. Let's see what you got.
Right, and how the Ravens have built their team, there's a pretty big method to what they do. And Spencer Schultz has pointed this out before to me and to a lot of other people, where on offense, the Ravens draft their guys. They do the cheapish signings. On defense, the Ravens load up with outside free agents and big contracts. I mean, on offense right now, who is the most expensive player who came from outside the organization? I literally think it's Morgan Moses. Because Jackson drafted, Andrews drafted, Brown drafted, Bateman drafted. So they draft those guys. Then on defense, it was Calais Campbell, defensive player, Marcus Peters, defensive player, Ngakoue, defensive player, Williams, defensive player. So it's like they do that. So I agree with you, Q. I think it'd be better for the organization to invest more in an edge guy, inside linebacker. Bobby Wagner, we've been talking about it for a couple weeks now. I think that that's a play you can go out there and get. You give the big contract to. It's not a 5-year, $150 million deal because he is getting a bit up there in age, but he deserves a big contract, and you don't have to give up the draft capital to get him. And he was slotted next to Patrick Queen and be, I think, a phenomenal leader of that defense. We'll head into our final break here and now, though. When we get back, we'll be diving into a bit of the Ravens free agent losses so far and talking about the impacts they might have. So be sure to stay tuned for that. Still a ton to talk about here on Locked On Ravens. But first, let me tell you a bit about Built Bar. And this time of year, people give up on their New Year's resolutions all the time, but don't do it this year. And if yours is to eat healthy, do it thanks to Built Bar. And there are a lot of great things Built Bar has to offer, including the Built Bar Puffs, which are really, really cool. If you haven't had them, you're missing out. They're the first ever protein-infused marshmallows. They're really, really interesting. And they're not just a protein bar. They're a treat. They're covered in 100% real chocolate, just like all Built Bars are. They contain 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. A ton of great flavors too. Mint brownie is my personal favorite, but you also have coconut, almond, and more. So go to built.com, use promo code LOCK15, get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at built.com. We're back. Our final segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher is still here with Qadry Ismail. Thank you for making Locked On Ravens your first listen every day. Tomorrow, there's no episode. Sunday, there's no episode. We'll be back here on Monday with another mock draft Monday. But make your second listen Locked On NFL Draft. Ryan Tracy and former NFL cornerback Eric Crocker bring the NFL draft to life every day with insight and analysis on college football prospects and NFL front offices. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts. But Q, let's talk a bit about the Ravens free agent losses so far. Now, guys like Eric Tomlinson, Josh Johnson, I don't think are super big needle movers. Those are guys who you can say, all right, good luck in Denver, which is where both of them went. But there are a few guys that could have decently big impacts and have decently big holes on this team if they're not replaced. Let's start with Anthony Averitt first, who signed with the Las Vegas Raiders on a 1-year deal, right around $4 million, which actually for him, I think is a pretty good value deal for the Raiders because I think he has shown flashes before. But that leaves the Ravens cornerback room now with minus Averitt, minus Tavon Young, Marlon Humphrey, Marcus Peters, both returning from season-ending injuries. There's some depth to be filled in there. Do you feel like Averitt will have a big loss on this team, and do you feel like his loss will be felt, or is this more, if the Ravens just get some guys depth-wise, they'll be okay?
I think Averitt, you can get some depth for him. I know Wink Martindale was high on him. Be honest with you, I wasn't. Something about his game was just okay. I think when you look at Bozeman, of all the guys that left, that was kind of like, oh, that one kind of hurt, like a gut punch. That was the one. I just know Bozeman. The year prior, that playoff game and that New England game when both balls of the center's snaps went over Lamar's head. Obviously, in the Bills game, it was a concussion against the Patriots. It knocked them out of a potential field goal, and then they wound up losing both games. It would have totally changed the course, I think, if they would have or were able to get points on the board for the Patriots game. And who knows if they would have had an opportunity had you just had a quarterback center exchange with the Bills. Now, with all that said, he also knew all the calls. He knew the nuance of the offense, and there's value in that chemistry between him and Lamar. Can Lamar get it with somebody else? I mean, this is pro football, and, change always happens, and you got to do what you got to do. But I think ultimately, the Bozeman trade really is one where I'm like, dang it, wonder what went on. Because if you look at the money, like we said about Patrick Ricard, you got to have role players, and they're not going to break the bank. Bozeman really didn't break the bank either compared to his other guys that he got, money from. But the Ravens, they have their formula, and a part of their formula is like, look, we're going to do what we're going to do, and part of what we're going to do is not pay, certain guys in certain positions. And the position that, we're looking at that is like, all right, I think it's a good position to have. It's one where you got Bradley Bozeman on your team at center, and they just don't want to do that. So, yeah, I guess if you're looking at the dance floor, some girls, you're like, man, I'm going to go up and ask her to dance. Other girls are on the corner of the wall because they know they're so cool they don't even need to worry about going out there. Or you got some girls hanging out with some other girls, and they're just chilling. and they're like, yeah, I don't really like that dance, or I don't like that song. I'm going to wait it out. That being said, I think Bradley Bozeman was one of the people that you want to go up to and make a good, strong offer, because I think he's that valuable. I think he's that good of a dancer that you would have kept him at the dance, but didn't happen. I worked that analogy. I worked it.
I love it. I love the dance analogy there. And speaking of Q, there seem to be three options in terms of Bozeman in the replacement for him. And that is either signing a veteran on the open market, such as a J.C. Tretter, who, in my opinion, is by far the best guy left and would be the only guy I'd consider signing if I were the Ravens at that position. Then you have the draft, where you could invest in a guy like Tyler Linderbaum early, get a guy in the mid-rounds, or you could stick with what you have if you're the Ravens and look to Patrick Ricard or Tristan Colon potentially as the next replacement. Q, out of those three options, how would you rank them in terms of what you would like and then what you would not like?
I think when we look at the way this team is made up, I think if we are talking about positions and the position of strength, Lamar is all encompassing when I'm looking at the team as far as how it functions. Why not build up a wall around him of consistency, and then why not give him, every opportunity to succeed on the outside? It's not complex. It is somewhat, but it isn't, and that's where I think, Kevin, I'm just like I can see where in this particular case, I'm at a loss, and I don't know why, but maybe it is a draft. Maybe it is still a guy out there that we don't see, but I'm at a loss.
Yeah, to me, it feels like Tretter is the best option. You have a veteran center, and the Ravens, they have the cap space to make it work money-wise. The thing is you've said the Ravens have certain positions they just don't historically invest in, and center is one of those positions where, Ryan Jensen leaves for a big money contract. Matt Skura comes in, then it's McCary. Then you have, even back when they had like Jeremy Zutov, if you want to go a little further back, that wasn't a huge contract. It was, they aren't signing these huge big money centers. So at this point, to me, it feels more likely that they'll probably go draft oriented, although my choice is J.C. Tretter. I just feel like, to me, even if they go with McCary, he, in my opinion, is best used as a super sixth offensive lineman who can step in any position instead of being used at one as a starter. So Tretter's my option, but I feel like it's more likely they would go in the draft, and maybe I'm just like reverse jinxing it and they'll go and sign Tretter and everybody will be happy. But I think for now, I'm assuming they'll just draft a guy, but my preference is Tretter. But Q, lastly, Chris Board might be an underrated loss for this team, especially on the special team side of things. It's not like he's going to necessarily say, well, the Ravens aren't winning the Super Bowl because they don't have Chris Board on their team anymore. But do you feel like special teams wise, losing Anthony Levine Sr. on the field, losing Chris Board on the field, that they'll have to kind of recover pretty quickly from that? How do you feel like those losses will impact the special teams unit?
It's going to impact them a lot because there's schemes that, you can implement, and there's whether or not, you got guys that are going to be out there showing the other guys what to do, how to do. There's nuances, obviously, from the way the game has been somewhat amended with the way kickoff is now. Punt coverage and punt return still is every bit in play, but the kickoff and kickoff return is not so much. I think there's something, where a lot of teams are, opting to go for two a little bit more. So, that extra point / hey, what do we do defensively to stop it? Not as important, if you will. But again, guys in the locker room, guys understanding what it is to be a pro, how to handle yourself. You factor all that in. And what did Eric DaCosta says every year? You can't sign everybody, can't keep everybody. And guys like that, when they leave out of the locker room, you wish them well, but you just know that, hopefully they will, catch on somewhere else and do as good of a job, but you'll miss them.
Right. And the Ravens, again, speaking of historically, they've been historically good at finding those special teams contributors. I mean, whether it's in free agency or drafting them or signing them in undrafted free agency, they've done a good job at finding guys who can play special teams. We obviously know how much they value special teams. And it's important for them to go out there and find players who can contribute at a high level on that end, because sometimes it can win or lose you a football game. And for the Ravens, they have won more than lost on that end, thanks to one Justin Tucker. But I think that for Baltimore, losing Borden Levine might have a bit more of an impact than some people anticipate early on. But as the year goes on, guys get more familiar, I think it will shore up. But I wouldn't be shocked if there are a couple growing pains within the first maybe month or so of the season there. But Q, that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for joining me here once again on this show. When we get back next week, maybe the Ravens will have made a move, and maybe that move is either J.C. Tretter or one Bobby Wagner.
Hopefully it's both. And hopefully the Ravens will be in even better position than what we're talking about right now. But I'm glad they got Pat Ricard, Pancake Pat, back in the fold.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much again, Q. When we get back here on Monday after our 2-day break, we'll be diving into another Mock Draft Monday, so stay tuned for that, and I will see you on Monday.